What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with your man, Measureaholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 4 of my Parthian campaign for the Divided Impera Overlord for Total War Rome 2. Today, we are recovering from our most sincere and dramatic loss that we've received so far in the campaign. We lost Shah Arsakes the First, a man destined for greatness, had his life cut short terribly quick. So, since we're now getting to about 50 turns into the campaign, I thought I'd do a little bit of a sit rep to show you guys what's going on. So the yellow here represents our territory. We have 2 settlements right now, Armavir in the north and Tushpa in the southwest. Basically, we control eastern Armenia. To the southeast, we have the blue territory, which is our military allies that we've liberated. First off is the people known as Mada, who own Thrapsa. And then south of them are the people of Ganzak, known as the Ganzak people. So that is very nice that we have that little buffer against our enemies. However, the Atropatanians are launching a massive invasion against us and our allies. But we'll get into that a little bit more shortly. In addition, as we continue further east, we just see an entire ocean of red. We have the Atropatanians, we have the people of Parthia, we even have the Bactrians, and then a couple other small city-states that have basically joined in the fun in declaring war on us. And as you can see, Bactria is massive. They have at least 8 cities that we know of at this time, possibly even more in the fog of war that we can't see, and they've managed to convince some nomad Scythians of the north to join the war. Basically, the entire east has declared war on us after we basically had our exodus and were forced out of our, well, I wouldn't say homeland, but we'll call it our homeland of Parthia. So that is our current situation. However, we also have to consider who is a new Shah. So the new Shah is basically a pretender to the throne known as Otanes the First. Otanes was a noble serving under Arsakes the First. He is not a member of our family, but he is a member of our political party, and as such, we can't really directly control him or influence him, but he has selected a distant cousin of Arsakes the First, Vishtaspa the First, as his successor, as his heir. So basically, if the pretender Otanes the First were to somehow miraculously fall early on in his life, or at least at any point in his life, as long as we have the same heir, then the throne will move back to the Arsakid family proper. However, Vishtaspa isn't necessarily a member of our proper bloodline. He's basically a distant cousin of Arsakes the First, despite the family tree showing it here differently, but for the sake of roleplay, we'll be doing it different. So we will hopefully be having a more pure ruler coming to fruition very soon, but I'll get back to that in a little bit. In the meantime, now we need to look at our practical situation. We have 2 armies, one being in the capital at Tushpa, which is an all-infantry army. I made it all infantry because I expected the Atropatanians to march on the city, and I thought it would be easy to defend with that. And then in the east, northeast area, we have our all-cavalry army. Our infantry army is led by the new Shah, and the Atropatanians are waiting to the south just outside the city with a massive army. However, one thing I'm going to do is bring back our cavalry and make sure that they are close enough to the city to actually reinforce it. You can see on the right hand side of the screen, the Atropatanians actually have another massive army just outside of Thrapsa. So basically they're doing a 2-pronged attack against our people, and so we need to consolidate our position and unify our forces, or at least keep them in a position where they can support each other. Before we continue though, I do want to go over our technology tree just very quickly. Right now we're working on upgrading our supply chain to give us plus 10% ammunition for all missile units. I probably should have got that first in the campaign, but I didn't. I usually instead focus on civic duties, and in this campaign I've actually gone through and gotten all of the first basically sections of the civic tree, at least the majority of them. We will be finishing it off shortly. And the goal of that is to try and increase our economy, our growth, our happiness, and also our political loyalty from the other political parties, as that is a growing concern, or at least a consistent concern for us so far. In the meantime though, after we hit the end turn button, the people of Thrapsa have entirely betrayed us. The Atropatanians invaded their city, took them over, and forced their people to become a satrapy of them. someone who was just our ally is now our enemy, which obviously we cannot allow to go unpunished. The Gunzak people are still independent, but they're not even fighting the Atropatanians, so they're not too helpful right now. Who is helpful, however, is the Armenians. We managed to surround the Atropatanian army with our own Parthian armies, and then the Armenians came out from their mountain strongholds and actually helped us defeat them. The Armenians have been insanely helpful throughout this whole war, which is kind of funny due to what I'm about to do, but I'll explain that a little bit more shortly. Point is that we wipe out one of the Atropatanian massive armies that was coming towards us for very little cost of our own manpower, which is fantastic. We ransom the captives, get quite a handsome reward. However, despite our forgiveness for the enemy troops and captives, it's just not good enough, and the Atropatanians send their army that was at Frapsa now north into northeastern Armenia, and they take over the settlement of Armavir. This is a pretty big blow to us. Not only is it big because we only have 2 settlements, or at least we did, Armavir was actually very valuable. It had the gold resource, and as such it made trade fairly lucrative. However, what is even worse is that the Atropatanians lose it immediately to the Armenians, and the Armenians then lose it to the Kartli people of the Caucasian mountains. We can't retake the settlement without going to a whole new series of wars against the Kartli and their allies. They actually have 2 allies that are very close by, and they have their own massive armies at their disposal. And even though our armies are better than theirs, we just can't manage to fight on so many fronts. So what we're going to do instead is focus on reclaiming Thrapsa. If we can do that, we can perhaps get a settlement buffer between us and the Atropatanians, and hopefully deal with Thrapsa once and for all. At least that's the idea. So Shah Otanes I will lead his first proper battle against the people of Thrapsa. And here we are with the sun setting behind the army. The people of Thrapsa are actually attacking us. I sent the army to attack this settlement, realized that there was too many troops, and then I retreated, but I retreated to an area that was very hilly, so that when the enemy did attack us, we would have the high ground. And as you can see, it's worked out pretty much perfectly. We are on a massive series of hills, and we have some very steep ground here. And this will also be the first battle where we have the majority of our army being of infantry. We're using a lot of Caucasian spearmen as our front line, and then we have Armenian archers behind them, both of which are fairly standard levy style units, but the Caucasian spearmen actually have some excellent defense, being at 14 at the base, so that will make them last for quite a while in combat. But of course we have our Parthian cavalry contingents on the left and right hand flank, mixture of Parthian archers and cataphracts. I don't separate them, I actually mix them together so they can work in unison. However, the Thrapsan people are sending up their massive army of infantry, the majority of which are levy style units, but there are some more professional, heavily armored spearmen in the mixture, and they have quite a few archers, so hopefully our cavalry will be able to deal with that. The battle begins with our Armenian archers firing volleys against the enemy, and because we're up on the hill, we even have the ranged advantage, and as such, it will force the Thrapsans to come up against us. However, it was taking a little bit too long, and as you can see in the background, they're actually receiving reinforcements, so to make sure that the enemy army didn't regroup entirely and outflank our entire battle line, I ended up charging down the hill, and so we'll get a little bit of a bonus charging down the hill. We'll have the hill advantage. However, it still is going to be a little bit tricky, and it means that the enemy army won't be entirely exhausted by charging up the mountain into our own infantry, so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. We still have the high ground slightly, but it isn't as valuable as it was before, although our archers are still quite high up and are doing a lot of damage. In the meantime though, because we've engaged with the enemy infantry, we can now start to outflank them and use our cavalry to our best advantage as possible. So we have our cavalry charging into the skirmishers in the center back here, and then on the flanks we are mainly trying to focus on skirmishing, although over here on the left hand flank, which is the right hand side of the screen, we are actually trying to deal with the enemy general who is charging around in his own cavalry unit. Is dealing quite a lot of damage to some of our horse archer units, so hopefully we'll be able to corner him and kill him very quickly. While we're doing that though, on the far side of the battlefield, our cataphract units are charging in. Although these are more so shock cavalry units than cataphracts, we do have a couple noble units that are cataphract material, but these guys aren't necessarily it. We do have a mixture of shock cavalry, so the point is though is that our shock cavalry that we do have is still really, really good, and they will do some devastating damage against the enemy infantry that are stuck in the line. In the meantime, our archers have dealt with the enemy skirmishers entirely, thus nullifying their missile superiority that they might have had if all of their armies were able to regroup. And then as the battle continues, we basically just get rear charges happening absolutely everywhere. Our shock cavalry was incredibly useful. Our horse archer units, while not fantastic on the charge, were able to rout the enemy skirmishers and then deal with the enemy general as well. And once he had routed from the field, even though there was another enemy general technically on the field, he was just a captain of the garrison that was reinforcing here. And so as a result, we are then able to send out infantry to outflank the enemy infantry, and then that wins us a battle. The hopefully last battle of Thrapsa is ours. We get a heroic victory. We have 4,000 Parthians standing against 6,000 Persians here. Like I said, the majority of their army was kind of levy style, but they did have some significantly armored units such as the Persian hoplites. You can see at the top right hand side of the screen there. But all of our units did fantastic. The archers did excellent in damaging the enemy. They all got well over 100 to 150 kills, so that was very impressive. Overall, we did pretty well considering the amount of troops we were going up against. However, one of our noble horse archer units did get separated, and it took quite a bit of damage. And as a result, we will then merge it with the other noble horse archer unit and then hire some Persian lancer cavalry. So these guys also won't necessarily be cataphracts, but they will be a shock style unit, so that'll be just as helpful all the same. We then march on Thrapsa and take it through auto resolve without too many losses whatsoever, and then we will loot the settlement. I didn't really want to loot it because the population has been a massive issue for us. However, looting the settlement means that we stay very far away from bankruptcy, and our allies, the people of Ganzak, can deal with the rebellions for us, and they often do. But then finally, we get the thing that I wanted to talk about earlier, which is a new true heir to the throne of Parthia, which is Arsaces II. He is a member of the royal family who is, for sake of roleplay, we'll call him the son of Arsaces I. Arsaces II here is basically a son who was a firstborn son of Arsaces, and now he is coming out from the shadows, and he is basically letting the rest of the Parthian noble court know that he is here and that he has a right to the throne. He isn't, however, a direct member of the family just yet. It will take some convincing for the rest of the family to welcome him in. So in the meantime, he will be considered to be a bit of an outsider, and he basically has to fight for his position in the royal court itself. In the meantime, Vishtaspa has been busy. He's gotten married, but he's also had a bastard child out of wedlock already. So Vishtaspa is definitely not a leading example for the Parthian people. And Otanes I is doing fairly well so far, but at the end of the day, he is not Shah material. He is not of noble blood, at least not of Shah blood, and as such, we'll hopefully fix that in the coming years. But in the meantime, we need to focus on our current situation, and Armavi has once again been taken by another people, and this is the people of Arch-Bosporus, or the Greeks living on the northern Black Sea. They have some allies in the area, mainly around Trapezoid and the coastal Greek towns of the Black Sea. However, they do have some excellent armies. They have some Scythian horse archers, which are complementing their armies, and then they have some decent spearmen and some very good hoplites, and some basic skirmishers. So basically, we have another major player coming into Armenia, and the Armenians themselves have very massive armies. The garrisons are decent, however, their armies are more infantry based. So if we can get the right amount of cavalry, I'm kind of starting to think that maybe we should just consolidate our position, take over the Armenian towns when the right moment approaches, and if we can do that, we might stand a chance at surviving in Armenia. But as you can see, they have massive armies, but again, they're mainly made out of infantry, although the infantry is not to be underestimated. They have some very good spearmen, and they have cavalry support to try and tie down our own cavalry. So we won't be able to use our standard tactics of basically constantly drawing the enemy army away from itself and basically separating and dissecting it. But regardless, now that the Armenian armies are in northeastern Armenia and not really near their core settlements, we're going to launch a surprise invasion. So we're going to recruit a small garrison at Tushpa to take care of the capital, and then in the meantime what we're going to do is march on the settlement of Arso Masada. And the main point of this is not necessarily to take territory and hold on to it, but it's at least to give us more allies in the region. We can't afford to have more than one full stack army at this present time, and that's our biggest killer, while the enemy factions can have at least 3 full armies, even if they only have 1 city. So what we're going to do now is take over Arso Masada, and then hopefully liberate some Armenian nobles who will be willing to join us in the fight for survival, really. So let's jump on in and do it. And here we are on the battlefield. Shah, Pretender Shah, Otani's first, leads the army from behind though, but to be fair, he is leading a very heavily infantry-based army. He has a lot of Caucasian spearmen in front of him, a lot of Armenian archers as well. We're still going with that combination for now, but our army recruitment is very limited at this time. We're relying heavily on foreigners, basically the Armenian and Caucasian natives of the area, to fulfill roles in our army. And the Armenians do very well. They're very good archers, and they basically draw out the enemy garrison to come and attack us off their position on the hill. And the mass volleys will deal a lot of damage. And on the right and left hand flanks, as always, we have our cavalry, and we do have the Persian lancers now, so hopefully they will prove to be just as useful as our previous noble horse archer unit was. But the enemy army basically just charged us across the battle line once we had irritated them enough with our skirmishes. So you're going to be seeing a lot of frantic back and forth micromanagement here. I was basically making sure that our cavalry didn't get tied down for quite a while. And our main battle line did fairly well. Although the enemy Armenians had some very impressive spearmen in their garrison, it took quite a while to kill. Our Caucasian spearmen's defense is just so high with those massive shields as well. They're actually able to hold the battle line for a very long time. And while they're doing that, all the while our Armenian archers are annihilating the enemy from above. And so far the battle is going very well and very much in our favor. The left-hand flank of the enemy army crumbles quite quickly, and the skirmishes get entirely annihilated by our cavalry. I didn't mess around with our cav. I didn't let them just sit there and use all their ammo. Instead, we instantly charged in as soon as the enemy skirmishers were basically separated from their main army, and they are. And so that's what we're going to be doing. We even managed to separate a single spearman unit, and we will give him the good old Parthian sandwich and annihilate him. And after we do that, we get some beautiful recharges with our Lancer cavalry across the entire battlefield line. And with that, the Armenian garrison basically surrenders en masse, and we rout them from the battlefield. So our first victory against the Armenians goes very well indeed. And here are the statistics if you do wish to see them. We basically just lost a couple hundred men, which isn't too much of a big deal at all. However, at the end of this battle, I actually did have a crash in my game, so I had to replay the battle entirely. The battle was basically the exact same way, and we lost almost the exact same amount of men. We lost 224, I think, instead of 238. So not a big difference, but it did mean that we actually launched the invasion a turn earlier, which is now why we're in autumn. But we then liberated the settlement of Arso Masada. I wanted to occupy it really badly, but I also knew that we couldn't hold the settlement if we did. So what we will do is we liberated a section of the Armenian nobility to basically be forced to be an ally to us, and we finally get our first ever trade agreement with another faction. So that is very nice for us indeed. Even though we're playing on hard difficulty here for the campaign, we're finally getting some diplomacy rolling. And even then, after ending that turn, the Armenian, at least the original Armenian faction actually comes to us for peace. And now I played around with some of the options to see what they were willing to give. Basically, they either wanted a white peace or they were willing to pay us a bit of money, but I wasn't ready yet. I knew the Armenians had at least 3 more settlements, and I wanted to take at least 1 more of them before we gave them any recovery or time to recover. So then we will march on the settlement of Samosata now in northeastern Syria, or it's basically in the province of northeastern Syria. And even though we could have occupied this, we will liberate this one again. We have a very favorable order resolve in our favor, and as a result, we're just going to order resolve it away and not be too fussed about it. We did take another couple hundred casualties though, so now we've taken about 450 in total, and so it's starting to eat away at our population a little bit. So now I will accept peace with the Armenians. We've knocked them down quite a few blocks, and we've actually gained 2 allies in the region. So these city-states will hopefully be very valuable to our cause, and they will provide armies that will help our people deal with rebellions, which we've had almost every second or third turn throughout the entire campaign now, especially since we migrated. And hopefully they will dissuade other factions from declaring war on us, because military alliances do play a big part in the AI wanting to declare war on you. So looking at the tactical map, you can see we have 2 city-state alliances to the west, which is in the blue territory, and then in the east we have our own settlement of Thrapsa right now, which we've occupied, and then we have the people of Ganzak, who have now somehow actually managed to take 2 settlements. So Ganzak is actually proven to be fairly resourceful, although they are not at war with the Atropatanians yet. And after quite a few turns of us trying to recover and restore our army, the Atropatanians come at us once again. These people just do not leave us the hell alone, and they are marching on Thrapsa. And while I could have tried to rush an army over there, we're actually in the middle of reforming our army to use better units, and as a result of that, we just can't send the army over to defend Thrapsa. And Thrapsa isn't really all that dramatic for us to hold anyway. I'm kind of getting sick of fighting battles around it, so we're basically just going to let the settlement form. But even if I didn't want to, it wasn't much of an option. We had a small garrison there, they had a massive army, and now their armies are actually really, really good. They have spearmen that are also acting as archers, and they also have heavily armored spearmen, and they have cavalry, very good cavalry indeed. So these guys are going to be a massive issue on the battlefield from now on, and they're actually hitting their reforms around this time. I'm not sure if they did just yet, but I remember while I was recording this video, they did hit their reforms, and as a result of that, they're going to start to have some very, very nice armies indeed. In the meantime, though, like I said, we're reforming our own army. I was finally able to get enough money to recruit a good cavalry barracks, and as such, we will now begin to recruit horse archers. These are dedicated horse archers who are a step above the Dahe riders that we were using previously, and they actually have almost 3 times the amount of ammunition. In fact, I think they have 4 times the amount of ammo. On top of that, we also have the bonuses from Otanies, so that's very helpful. They'll prove to be invaluable in our campaigns moving forward. But here you can see we're dealing with rebellions constantly still, and I'm just getting sick of fighting battles against them, so I'm just auto-resolving them pretty much all the time now. I know I could keep my army out of the city and have a lot better public order, but we're at that point where it doesn't really matter what I do. The public order in the city of Tushba is just terrible, and so I'd rather keep my army in the settlement and have reduced upkeep because of it, and let my men recover faster and reinforce quicker. But looking east at the Atropatanian core territory around Ekbatana, they have so many more armies. They have 2 full stacks coming our way, and then they have another massive army being developed at their capital. And because of that, though, we're actually going to sue for peace. The pretender Otanies I, instead of avenging Arsakis I like he should, is now basically bringing great shame to himself, to the people of Parthia, and accepting peace with the Atropatanians. It is not what we wanted, but it has to be the decision for now. In the grand scheme of things, the Atropatanians are fairly small. All we need at this point in the campaign is time. We need a location that is going to be nurturing for our people. We need something that is sustainable and something that will provide us money and manpower to recruit the armies necessary to deal with the Atropatanians, and then of course to deal with Bactria in the east. We even tried to negotiate with the eastern factions for peace, but none of them would have it. The only people interested were the Atropatanians, so for now we'll have to settle for that. So now that we're basically at peace with all of our neighbors except the far eastern Bactrians and Scythians, we now need to figure out what we're going to do. The settlement of Tushpa is basically entirely devoid of resources. We have drained the population to be only around about 1,000 people living inside the city at all. Only a few hundred of which are recruitable. And then we have nowhere else to expand. We can either go north into the Scythian heartland and fight cavalry against cavalry, which is definitely not recommended. Or we can go south into the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. So what I'm doing over the next few turns here is I'm sending my scouts and agents to all of the core territories of the Seleucids here, and I'm trying to see just how many armies they have in the region, what's the strength of their garrisons, and is taking Mesopotamia a realistic goal. And we're actually going to go for it. Even though it's not necessarily the best choice, we'll be bordering the Bactrians, who have now invaded very far west indeed. They're basically in central Persia at this point. But taking Seleucia and the other cities in Mesopotamia will provide us with a very rich province, a very population-heavy province to recruit from, and they also have fantastic AOR units that are available. In addition, we will also be close enough to be able to launch invasions against the Atropatanians and the Bactrians when we are ready, but hopefully the mountains to the east will actually prove to be a decent barrier for us to control their invading armies as they do try to chase us down. So what we do is we recruit our entirely new army based on reformed units, and now we're striking a deal with the Mauryan Indian faction in the southeast, which is actually very powerful, and they're basically the only opponent that the Bactrians have to face that is fairly equal in strength and power. And now we are joining them in declaring war on the Seleucids in basically an effort to try and curb favor with the Indians, and hopefully that will build up to an alliance. In the meantime, we also get a non-aggression pact with the Kartli, so hopefully that will make them not stab us in the back. They could prove to be valuable allies in the future, but for now, well, ladies and gentlemen, we are marching into the ancient capital of the Seleucids, Seleucia. Perhaps it's not ancient, but it is a fantastic city. It is massive. It holds a lot of resources for us. It has a massive recruitable population. Hopefully, we're now marching into the new seat of the new and upcoming Parthian Empire, but for now, we have a massive siege on our hands. The Seleucids will not give it up without much of a fight at all, so this will be a siege to remember for sure. And here he is, Shah, the pretender Shah, Otanes I, leading his men from the rear, as he often does. He has a very cool little iron mask there, though. I like that quite a lot. The aesthetic is nice, but he's still not the true Shah. I don't care what anyone says. I'm not letting him be the Shah. But anyway, here is Seleucia. Seleucia will become our new capital if our army can take out the defending garrison. And they have a full 2020 garrison here. And even though we have a full 2020 army as well, this is going to be a very, very rough fight. We're obviously not siege builders. We're not city takers whatsoever. And as such, we only have a few ladders to go up against the enemy. We've waited a single turn. And now we have our army of spearmen. We even brought some Armenian mercenary spearmen, which are heavily armored. In the rear, we also have some noble archers to try and give support. And then on the left-hand flank, we have a mixture of interesting cavalry. We now are using Median or Atropatanian skirmisher cavalry. These guys are very, very nice. They're fairly well armored, decent shield, and they're basically very good at melee attacks. So they will use their javelins at a distance, and then they will engage in melee combat with the enemy and do very, very well. In front of them, on our left-hand flank, we have our dedicated Parthian archers. And now, while these guys might not look like much, this is the cream, the crop, the breadbasket of the Parthians. This is where the Parthian army is truly at its core, with horse archer units, especially lightly armored and fast-moving horse archer units. And horse archer units with a massive amount of ammunition. They have like 24 or something shots available to them, which is a heck of a lot to have. So the battle begins with us sending our horse archers forward to try and provide some cover for the men assaulting the city walls on the ladders. We're running the Cantabrian Circle again. It seems to be quite helpful in city sieges, although the pathfinding can be a little bit wonky. For the most part, it seems to be very helpful in that it allows our horse archers to provide consistent volleys of fire on the enemy while not taking really any casualties at all from them, which is very nice. And now our Caucasian spearmen and Armenian spearmen will now lead the charge onto the walls, and the Seleucid spearmen, or hoplites I should really say, are now already up on the walls ready to receive our assault. Now this is actually quite good because the archers of the enemy would have dealt some pretty devastating casualties if they were already on the wall. So now that the ladders have gotten a little bit further ahead, our pathfinding fixes itself a bit, and our Cantabrian circles continue to provide covering fire to the spearmen, now jumping up and climbing over the walls into Seleucia itself. And they have a fairly large garrison, but not too many of their units are of all that good quality, so I'm basically hoping that we'll be able to grind our way through the front entrance, although we do have a secret weapon which I'll show you shortly. But the main point is that on the left and in the center, our assault is receiving some very heavy pushback, and we're bumping into a lot of enemy positions over there. But on the right hand side over here, we're actually doing very well, and we're not encountering much resistance at all. So after a few minutes have passed, the center just above the gatehouse is actually almost entirely cleared, although there still are quite a few enemy units down below. On the left hand side though, this is where the real battle is going on. We've poured in hundreds of men up onto the wall, but the Seleucids, the Greeks, just refuse to retreat whatsoever, and as a result of that, they're having to grind their way through over a very long period of time, and while they're doing that, they're actually taking fire from the Seleucid archers on the ground. So to try and help them out, I've moved forward our horse archer units to be in a more disciplined formation, and while they're doing that, I'm having them focus fire on the enemy archer units. And while the accuracy isn't all that high since they're out of the line of sight, having this massive concentration of horse archer fire on the enemy is doing massive damage to them, and when we can get the perfect shot arc against them, we will end up taking them out. But however, here is our secret weapon. This is a shot of the enemy gate that is in the rear side of their city, completely on the opposite side of our assault. We're sending in one unit of Armenian mercenary spearmen who are heavily armored to attack one of the gates, and if they can take this gate, we have a contingent of medium cavalry who are ready to charge in and hopefully get some rear charges onto the enemy garrison in the city. However, that will be a little bit more complicated, and as a result of it being more complicated, as in our Armenian spearmen actually failed initially and they took some heavy losses and ended up retreating, I had to dismount one of our medium cavalry units to climb up on the wall and use his skirmishers to help out the Armenian spearmen, but hopefully it will still be enough for us to grind through. Back at the main gate, however, we've basically kicked the enemy almost off entirely off the walls. They are still sending up men though from down below, and our horse arch units are still trying to provide fire on the enemy, but they are killing a lot of our own men. The majority of our infantry have actually already retreated after a time of grinding against the enemy. But meanwhile, back at the rear gate over here, I ended up sending a second unit of horse skirmishers, I should say, up onto the gate, and because we did that, we were able to capture the gate, and now we can finally send in our cavalry units. Although now we only have 3 units of cavalry, it is still going to be very useful. In the meantime though, back at the main gate, after several more minutes have passed, almost all of our infantry have completely retreated from the battlefield. They've either retreated or been slaughtered on the ramparts here. Our Armenian spearmen are still holding on over there, but basically the rest of our infantry have retreated entirely. In the rear though, we're doing very well, and we're now surrounding the captain of the garrison with his elite hoplites here. Unfortunately, he's holding on the bridge, so we can't really outflank him, but our skirmisher cavalry will still try to do the best they can and try to get in some side shots into him at the very least, although they are sending in cavalry to help him out. Because we have so much cav now, so we have 3 units right here, more on the way, and the cavalry units that we do have are fantastic. We will be able to deal with them just fine. Speaking of fantastic cavalry units, we're now sending in our noble horse archer units up onto the ramparts themselves. That's right, they're dismounting from their horses. The enemy garrison was in a position where we couldn't really bombard them with our horse archers. So now Ottonius I is leading all of his noble cavalry in a infantry-esque assault on the city. He's basically dismounting all of the cavalry units that he has, besides his generic horse archer units, and is assaulting the walls himself. So while in the meantime that happens, we now surround the captain of the garrison entirely by pulling through on the side of his left-hand flank. We cross the bridge, and then we're basically preparing to send our medium cavalry to come in and rear charge the enemy at the main gate. But by this point, our noble horse archer units that were dismounted have done fantastic damage against the remaining garrison troops here at the main gate. And the majority of the enemy garrison has actually already routed or been slaughtered. You can see the amount of bodies in the area here. It's insane. There are thousands dead on the walls themselves, and many more down below. And with that, though, we actually get the victory. We get the new throne of the Parthian Empire, Seleucia. Here are the statistics if you do wish to see them. As you can see, we lost a massive amount of men. We basically lost all of our infantry, which equates to just over 2,000 Parthians dead on the battlefield, which is a massive loss, and it's our biggest loss we've had so far. However, it was worth it. We now have a new capital to take hold of, and hopefully it will provide us with a position of power in the east, one strong enough to deal with the Seleucids, kick out the Greek invaders of the east, and then reform and reorganize ourselves to march east and deal with the Greeks of Bactria. But again, we lost all of our infantry just about in that encounter. However, thankfully, the settlement of Seleucia provides some fantastic AOR Babylonian spearmen. So ladies and gentlemen, that's where we'll end it today. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. We started in Armenia, we did some fighting in northwestern Persia, and now we are down in Mesopotamia. So things are getting very, very interesting indeed. I'm very curious to think of what you all have to say about our new seat of power in Mesopotamia. But things are just getting started, ladies and gentlemen. We have to deal with the Seleucids, we have to reorganize ourselves, and we have to get ready. And hopefully we will soon have Arsaces II take his rightful position as Shah of the new Parthian Empire. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.